You probably know the drill by now since this format is older than YouTube itself, but I'm going to be looking at several games that came out in 2022 in alphabetical order, talk about what they are and why I like them, and give each of them a little reward down in the corner here because the Game Awards won't return my calls about being a part of their selection panel. I know you've been screening my calls, Jeff. I just want to talk. This year, I have a total of 20 games that I want to talk about. So instead of just dawdling on and continuing to make a bunch of terrible jokes, I'll just get right to the list. And if you didn't click on it, well, stick around anyway. You might find something new and interesting to check out for yourself. A hybrid of deck building, city building, and roguelike hack-and-slash gameplay, Cult of the Lamb is an adorably stylized little game about creating a cult, tending to your flock, and dismantling the system of old gods. Gameplay is broken up between dungeon crawling to fight monsters and gather resources, visiting other locations to also gather resources or additional abilities, and managing your home base where your congregation flourishes and worships you as the prophet to the one who waits. I was enthralled with the game after playing the demo, and I'm glad to say that the game keeps that momentum going forward into an experience that's admittedly sometimes hard to fully manage, but still fun to play all the same. The original Destroy All Humans is one of my favorite PlayStation 2 games, and while I never actually played the original version of this remade sequel, it's gotten me interested in revisiting that older version. Everything is improved from the first game, including the art style, weapons, optional skins, and more, and playing through this game is just as fun as the original, now with a globe-trotting theme instead of sticking to the good old US of A. I'm glad that I found the game so enjoyable, which just helps to prove to me that it isn't purely nostalgia that makes me enjoy the first game. If they end up remaking some of the other Destroy All Humans games, I'll probably pick them up, though from what I've seen, that's a little less likely. So until then, I'm just glad I have plenty of content between these two games to enjoy. I'm not usually a fan of horror titles, and while it might be hard to classify Ghostwire Tokyo as a horror game, it certainly has enough elements of one to at least be related to the genre. The game follows KK and Akito as they make their way through Shibuya, freeing the trapped souls of innocence while also facing off against monstrous yokai, all in a bid to save Akito's sister and for KK to get revenge against a mysterious, masked individual who I am still convinced is his former lover. Similar to Tango Gameworks' other acclaimed horror franchise, The Evil Within, I love the world the game sets up, but I feel like the game is occasionally clunky and has trouble focusing at times. Overall, I still enjoyed playing the game more than I thought I would, and hopefully soon I'll be able to sit down and see how this hauntingly beautiful game concludes. Maybe my slash fiction will come true after all. I knew I was going to love playing Goat Simulator 3 when the game opened up to me riding in a cart as an homage to Skyrim. Once I was free to roam around and cause mayhem, I fell right back into place with the game as it controls very closely to the original, just with a few updated mechanics, and beyond that is filled to the brim with content. With a massive island to explore, plenty of collectibles, cosmetics, and missions to find and complete, and a whole lot of goatly goodness to be had, I have already lost hours of my life to this game and plan to lose many more. Goat Simulator 3 might just be more of what made the original Goat Simulator such a fun game, and it might be mildly annoying that they skipped over the number 2 for the sake of a joke, but I absolutely enjoyed my time with Goat Sim 3 and can't wait to see what sort of chaotic goodness they have planned for potential DLC. Depending on who you ask, Elden Ring or Rabbi Bill Clinton may have won Game of the Year at the Game Awards, but for me there was little to no question that God of War Ragnarok was my personal Game of the Year. Ragnarok follows up the 2018 game beautifully, showcasing how Kratos and Atreus are more understanding of one another while still having a lot to learn. The various realms you get to explore are as vibrant and beautifully realized as ever, and the looming threat of Odin, Thor, and the other Norse gods along with Freya and other outside threats keeps the tension high throughout your journey. It's just an all-around fantastic title that only falters in one or two small areas similar to the first game, and one that I will surely be dedicating another playthrough to once New Game Plus comes out. Officially announced during a February 2022 Nintendo Direct, this 2-pack collection of the first 2 Klonoa games is something that I was genuinely surprised to see. I remember renting the first game for the PlayStation 1 when I was a kid and absolutely loving it, but never actually got around to finishing it. And since nowadays a copy of the game costs more than I can sell a kidney for on the black market, I've checked. This collection has a fantastic way to relive the games I had fond memories of as well as play the sequel. even if I already own a physical copy of the sequel. All that said, the game plays just as I remember it doing, and while I'm not necessarily a fan of Bandai Namco pulling the whole "if this does well, we'll make more" shtick while giving it less marketing than Disney did for Strange World, I do sincerely hope that this game did well enough for Klonoa to come back. I mean, if KO Kangaroo of all things can get a remake, why not this happy little lad? Turning the combat and aesthetics of Doom 2016 into a rhythm game is a weird thing to say out loud, and yet the developers over at The Outsiders have managed to create an experience that fits into that perfectly and feels satisfying to play. Metal Hellsinger is about a demon simply known as the Unknown, who fights her way through the many levels of hell to try and reclaim her voice from the ruler of hell, the Red Judge. Gameplay largely revolves around moving from room to room, dispatching the various denizens of hell put in front of you to the beat of some exceptionally good metal music, and the better your combo, the better the music gets and the better the action becomes. Metal Hellsinger feels a little awkward at times, and for someone like me who can't follow the beat to save his life, it can be occasionally annoying, but it's still a fantastic little experience that I could just play again and again for some sweet, sweet metal music. What I initially thought looked like a cheap mobile game actually turned out to be an incredibly fun fighting game full of potential. I have some problems with how characters are unlocked. The abundance of very overpriced microtransaction-specific cosmetics isn't really that great, and I have a general disinterest in the teammate attack mechanic that rarely feels like it truly impacts a fight, but it's still a lot of fun to play regardless of that. It's a game I found myself continuously playing since launch, with Shaggy, Garnet, Harley, and Superman being my mains thus far. Maybe down the line I'll do a roster ranking video like I did with Smash Ultimate. Either way, I'm eager to see how far this game can grow, and here's hoping that it doesn't become another victim of the Warner Bros. Discovery merger. Normally, I wouldn't put a game like My Name is Mayo into one of these videos, but I was genuinely surprised by how this one turned out, enough to actually consider putting it here, and so here it is. The game starts out the same as it ever does for a My Name is Mayo game. Tap a digital jar of mayo an obscene number of times, occasionally switching what the jar is dressed like, with a bit of flavor text to accompany the costume change that acts as the game's story. However, the game takes a much more introspective turn after tapping 7,000 total times, eventually turning into a sort of existential walking simulator with a few minigames lumped in for funsies. Overall, the game is still as simple as ever, but I was surprised by how the game ended enough to include it here. All three of the My Name is Mayo games only cost you about $5 in total, so if the thought of tapping digital jars of mayonnaise appeals to you, then have at it. There are certainly worse cheap games on the store that you can play. Kart racing games thrive around having fun characters, unique tracks, wacky weapons, and a plethora of game modes, and while it has a bit of clunk to it, Nickelodeon Kart Racer 3 Slime Speedway is a perfectly serviceable and fun kart racer. There's not really a whole lot more than I can say here since I made a video about it a few months back, and my feelings toward the game haven't really changed. Like I said, it's serviceable and fun, but not much else to it really. Pick it up if you enjoyed the other games like I did, or if you just want some Nicktoon fun in general. A fantastically new interpretation of the Pokemon formula, Legends Arceus is probably the most fun I've had playing a Pokemon game in a long time. Granted, I still enjoy the formula of the classic games, but being able to explore entirely open areas, capture Pokemon by using smarts rather than battle knowledge, and having additional quests related to finding specific Pokemon helped elevate this one high above previous games in the series. I sincerely hope that they learn from the success of this game and deliver more experiences like it going forward. But if anything, I just hope that Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, and Game Freak give their devs a bit of a break. This game came out a bit rough around the edges, but there weren't that many problems that I can recall. The same cannot be said for our next game, however. Where Legends Arceus is merely rough around the edges, it is painfully obvious that Scarlet and Violet were rushed out the door. The games are riddled with sometimes game-breaking bugs, features are either limited or completely missing when compared to previous entries, and the whole experience feels somehow more hollow at times. But damn if I haven't been having a blast with it. The open world and freedom of choice in regards to the 3 story paths are welcome changes, and some of the new Pokemon have become some of my new favorites. I do sincerely wish that Nintendo would just give the Pokemon team the time they need to make these games as good as they could be, instead of rushing out half-finished products quicker, but there's not much I can really say that'll really persuade them otherwise. A game whose development I followed for quite a while on TikTok before launch, Potionomics is a dating sim, deck building, store management hybrid with so much charm boiled into every nook and cranny. Everything from the character design to the gameplay is how I hoped it would be and more, and the game certainly doesn't hold your hand with the main mission of brewing potions for a major competition so you can afford to keep making potions at the potion shop you inherited from your estranged uncle. My first genuine attempt at the tournament ended with my defeat, and instead of the game just saying, "Aw shucks, try again sport," it straight up said game over and that my character now lived in a cardboard box. Potionomics is a charming little management adventure that you should absolutely check out for yourself to help support the devs, and get ready for some brutally honest but still incredibly fun times. The various Jackbox Party Pack games are always a blast to play with friends, either in person or over Discord. It's also fun to watch a movie with friends and make fun of it as you do, cracking jokes to see who can come up with the best riff. Well, now you can combine the love of both forms of entertainment with Riff Tracks the game. The simplicity of putting in prompts at specific moments makes for a fun experience overall, and the accessibility of the game means that just about anyone can play, since all you need is one person to own the game and for everyone else to have access to an internet browser on either their phone or a computer. Many hours of silly, laugh-out-loud fun has been had with this game, and it's a go-to for me and my Discord friends when we want to have game nights. Maybe it'll be part of yours too. Given that I have already talked at length about both Goat Simulator 3 and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it should hopefully be clear by now that glitches in games don't really bother me all that much if I still think the overall gameplay is fun. Saints Row is a great encapsulation of that idea, since the game is glitchy like you wouldn't believe, and yet I still largely enjoyed myself. I will say that the world of Santa Ileso is at times a bit generic for a Saints Row open world, and a lot of the missions involve either driving from point A to point B or partaking in a firefight, but a lot of the over-the-top Saints Row flair is still present and accounted for. The new cast of characters are welcome additions to the universe, and overall it's a nice, intentionally silly alternative to Rockstar's money-printing empire. You're a kitty cat with a backpack. No matter how many times I say that, it never really gets old. Stray was a lot more in-depth of an experience than I was expecting. I fully went into this just expecting it to be an open-world walking simulator or something where you just be a cat, but instead there's a whole story about robots trapped underground after a world-shattering event that involved way too many eyeballs and these little adipose knockoff head crabs. There's still plenty of that kitty cat flair baked into the game, like being able to nap in multiple places or knocking things off of shelves, both just because you can and also to help open new pathways, but there was a lot more existentialism than I was expecting from a kitty cat with a backpack game. In general, I thought the game was fantastic, and while I personally think other games should have received the nomination for Game of the Year at the Game Awards, it was nice to see it being honored like that. Maybe it got nominated because cats really do control the internet, I don't know. Essentially a side-scrolling walking simulator with minor platforming elements and rhythm sections, The Artful Escape is an interesting sci-fi experience with gorgeous visuals, a quirky sense of humor, and decent music throughout. The only real hiccup I have with the game is how linear it is, since the whole thing is about finding yourself, but given the structure of the game combined with the minor narrative choices throughout, it does at least allow for some uniqueness in how your story unfolds. I think the game could benefit from one or two diverging paths that don't eventually meet up and allow for multiple playthroughs, but in general it was still a lot of fun to experience all the same. The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe is at once the long-awaited premiere of the original Stanley Parable on consoles, the definitive version of the game, and acts as every imaginable sequel to the game in perpetuity should you choose to open and close the game over and over. The premise of either listening to the narrator or defying him gets even more nonsensical with the introduction of the Reassurance Bucket, turning old and familiar routes into new little narratives, while also introducing a slew of new branching paths to take with your lovable new companion. In general, it's just as good as the original game, but with more content to keep you busy, and both fans of the original and newcomers to the game will find plenty to be delighted with. I didn't even hear about this game until it was nominated at the Game Awards, and after picking up Vampire Survivors on Steam and trying it out, well, I lost about 3 hours of my life to it, and it barely felt like 20 minutes I was having that much fun. The game has a very addictive and recursive loop of entering a level, dispatching enemies to earn gems to level up with new abilities, and just surviving as long as possible to earn more and keep doing that all over again. With a bunch of different heroes to choose from, each with their own unique quirks, as well as a massive assortment of enhancements, this game has probably delayed at least 1 or 2 videos by a few days already because I keep wanting to play it. Sure, it's a mobile game at heart, but that simplicity and addictive gameplay loop is what makes this one shine, and at least there's no microtransactions to worry about. It's cheap as heck and just a fun time all around, so check it out if you're at all intrigued. I like to keep my eye out for indie games that might pique my interest, and one genre of indie game I usually enjoy is the twin-stick shooter. Games like Enter the Gungeon and Trigger Witch have become recent favorites, but one of the best releases from this year for me was Wildcat Gun Machine, and not just because I'm technically the first person to get the platinum on this. All of the enemies look like chibi-fied versions of something you would find in a Doom game, and the variety of weapons feels like a Ratchet & Clank game more than your average twin-stick shooter might. The only thing that could have made this one a bit better in my mind is the inclusion of either a fully procedurally generated map or an optional mode that did that. But if not, it's still a hellishly fun game to blast my way through, and a wonderful way to wrap out this list. I tried to play as many diverse and unique games that interested me as I could this year, but there are undoubtedly some that I missed or just didn't feel like talking about. So as always, I extend the question to you. What are your favorite games of 2022 and why? Let me know down in the comments below. Follow me on all the socials you see on screen if you feel like doing so. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see all of you in the next video. Thanks again for watching, and take care.